Okay, so this is meant to be a review of questions number 11 and 12, 11 through 12 on treatment planning review number 1 assignment. So in this assignment, there are 3 questions related to this scenario where a patient is being treated to adjacent fields in this relationship, where there's an upper field for the thoracic spine and a lower field for the lumbar spine. With these field dimensions, the upper field is 9 by 27, the lower field is 9 by 16. So the first part of the series of questions asks you to calculate the skin gap or the spacing needed between these 2 fields in order for us to have an overlap at a specific depth. The depth is supposed to be 6 cm. So here's the scenario. This is the same patient but from the lateral view with field number 1 and field number 2. And the first question in this series of 3 asks you to calculate the space needed for these 2 fields, the skin gap, in order for these fields to overlap at a 6 cm point beneath the skin. And so you know the skin gap formula. Everyone did a really good job at calculating the skin gap. The second question in the series switched it up a little bit and asked you to switch the SSDs. So in the first scenario, the SSDs, the source to skin distance, were the same for each field, 100 cm. The second question asked you to consider if the SSDs were different because of the curvature in the patient's anatomy. If one were at an SSD of 97, field number 1, 97, and field number 2 were an SSD of 94, then recalculate the gap. And most of you were able to do that and see that the gap spacing between these 2 fields would be different. Now the third question asked you to use a different strategy to try to make sure that we didn't have a hot spot or cold spot, and that is to calculate the divergent angle of both of these fields. And to calculate divergence, we need this formula. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the divergent angle for this field, this angle, and we're going to calculate the divergent angle for that field, and then we're going to tilt the beams towards each other so we end up with a situation like this. When you tilt those beams, this edge, the edge at which the 2 fields are adjacent to each other, is going to be straight. So we don't have to worry about overlap at depth. These edges are going to continue to be straight at depth, and we won't have any hot spots or no cold spots. But I need to know how much to tilt the beams. So now in the typical situation when we're treating these fields, the patient is in this relationship with the gantry, the head in and the feet out. So the beams are treated this way. But if we're going to tilt the beams in this direction, then we can't tilt the beams, we can't tilt the gantry this way, and we can't tilt the gantry that way. The gantry stays upright and rotates on an axis this way. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to rotate the couch so that the patient is actually in this relationship with the gantry, where the head is this way and the feet is that way. Or this could be vice versa. But when we tilt the gantry, we're going to be able to, in effect, cancel the divergence for each field and end up with a situation like this. So we're going to take that formula, and we're going to take each field differently, separately, because the angle of divergence is going to be different for this field and that field. This field has a different length. This field is 27 cm long, and this field is just 16 cm long, right? And this is the dimension through which we want to calculate divergence, through the lengths. So this A in the formula is going to have to be the lengths of the field. And then we're going to need both SSDs. All right, we're calculating this angle, so we need this segment of this triangle, and we need this portion, this base, in order to calculate this angle. All right, so here's the formula. Field number 1, we're taking the length and dividing it by twice the SSD, and then we're going to multiply it by tangent to the -1, or the arctan. And this is about what you should get. Make sure your calculator is in degrees. So, and the other field, same, except the SSD is different and the length is different, and these are the numbers of degrees. So in other words, if I want this scenario to be, then I'm going to have to angle the gantry. Angle the gantry. When I treat field number 1, I'm going to have to angle the gantry this way, about 8 degrees. And when I treat field number 2, I'll angle the gantry this way about 5 degrees. Okay, hope that helps.